Hi guys, today's video is going to be a little different from previous videos and voiceovers that I've done. As you can see, I've got Teddy on long lines today in this video. This was the first ever time that I have long lined a horse, and I'm fairly sure it probably would have been Teddy's first time long lining. If it wasn't his first time, which I'm fairly sure it was from his reactions, it would have been a very long time since he was in long lines. When he probably first would have been broken in would be the last time he was long lined, if he ever was. So in this video I've got my instructor leading him in a halter-in lead, just to sort of be by his head and be sort of a safety blanket for him, as we weren't sure how he would react to having two lunge lines behind him and me also behind him. So we wanted to sort of have my instructor as a safety blanket in case he was to do anything. I am probably further back behind him than I should be. That's also because of safety measures we wanted to take in case he reacted negatively to me being so close behind him. So I'm not in kick range if I'm that far behind. So as you can see, he's doing quite well. My instructor's got a eye on him for me at the front end, and I can just focus on keeping the slack out of the lunge lines and sort of sticking behind him properly. He does really well on the long lines, considering he's probably never had any sort of education like this before, apart from when he was probably broken in. My instructor was telling me all throughout this lesson that he's so honest, that she could see he was quite unsure, and you can see in his eye and in his neck he's quite tense, and he does look at the lunge lines quite often throughout the video. You can see he kind of looks back or will resist a bit when I'm trying to do new things with him, like turning, for instance. Stopping in the long lines was a bit of a challenge, as he's not quite good at keeping still for very long in the halt at the moment. There you go, you can see he did that quite nicely, but he does tend to want to move off instead of staying in halt, which is a bit of a challenge with me on him, let alone in long lines. But he did really well. He didn't react at all. He didn't throw one kick. He didn't spook at anything. We eventually did take him off of the lead line, but that's further into the video. So yeah, I'm so proud of him, and you know, this would be a really good video for some people to watch if they're going through the same sort of retraining as I am, or if they're breaking in their own horse. Instead of just sticking the horse on long lines for the first time without anyone there to sort of be a security blanket, I'd maybe suggest doing what I did and getting someone more knowledgeable to sort of lead them around from their head, and then just have the lunge lines behind them. I did a lot of preparation before I decided I wanted to try this. I did a bunch of foundation work with him on the ground, getting him used to moving things around his legs, because he was quite spooky at things dragging along the ground, and he still is on occasion. But I've done some groundwork with, you know, lifting his feet up with the rope around them, you know, turning his body around with the lunge line over the top of him. He's well used to the surcingle. He's had that on plenty of times before long lining him. And I'm completely competent, and he is amazing to lunge in the first place, so it was quite easy to sort of transition to this sort of work anyway. But we still wanted to be as safe as we could be for his first time and my first time as well. As you can see, we're now moving on to trying to do a little bit of turning and spiraling in and out. He did quite well at it. He's still a bit not knowledgeable about what I'm trying to ask, which is fine, even though it's kind of exactly like riding. You've got one rein for one hand and one rein for the other. But he did that turn quite well. I've just got to keep up on the back end of him. As you can see, I'm trailing behind him a bit. So what you can't hear in here is my instructor is telling me to say what direction I want him to go and to pull that rein to get him to turn. So if I want him to turn left like I'm doing now, I would say left, 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 and sponge with the left rein to get him to turn his head and to walk that way. And then if I want him to turn right, I'd say right, 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 pull the right rein and turn his head and his body to the right. If I wanted him to stop, I'd pull back with both reins and say halt. Sort of the same sort of cues you would give to, I guess, sled dogs. Not obviously the same cues, but the same concept of having a voice cue for going left and a voice cue for going right, and a voice cue for stopping and going, obviously. So as you can see, my instructor has now taken off the sort of safety blanket we had for him, which was the lead line attached to the halter he's wearing. She is still walking in front of him as a sort of focal point for him to follow, just as a safety blanket still, but she's further away, so Teddy can focus more on me than on her being directly right next to him. So he has to rely more on what I'm telling him than what my instructor was telling him. So we're having a tiny bit of trouble here, as you can see. He got a bit stuck and wanted to stop at the rail, but I just tell him to go forward more, and he starts following my instructor again. He did really well with this. He is quite a good thinker. You can see him licking and chewing a bit. He stops at my boyfriend who's filming to say hello, but that allows him a little bit of time to sort of think about what I'm asking him. A little bit of white noise, as I call it, allows him to process what's happening and sort of lick and chew and think about what he's being asked. So I think it's here. Yeah, he has a little bit of a freak out and goes to turn in the opposite direction to what I'm trying to tell him to go. That is literally the worst thing he did this whole lesson, is just try and turn the opposite direction. He didn't freak out, he didn't try and spin and run away, he didn't try and kick, he didn't throw his head up in the air, he didn't do anything. He literally just sort of turned his bum to me. Even though his reaction wasn't bad, my instructor did come and sort of redirect his attention to her and get him to follow her again, just so we could get back on track and get him listening. He got praised for going in the right direction, obviously, and you know, the mantra, don't beat, repeat, rings well in this. We just repeated what we were trying to do, which was to get him to turn correctly in the right direction instead of getting confused and turning in the wrong direction. You can see he got a little bit distracted there again, but my instructor just turns his head and redirects his attention when need be. And he's a good boy, and he relaxes and puts his head down.
Yeah, it's still out a little, but you'll get more control now that we know that he's not getting hard to blow off about it. Yeah.
Okay, so here he gets a little bit stuck and distracted again, and he takes a few steps back. I get a little bit worried that he's going to do something, but my instructor comes in and picks him up at the head again, and we go on our way. He behaved really well. As soon as I asked him to sort of woo and let my instructor come and grab his attention again, he instantly followed and had no sort of bad reaction or hesitation, which is really good. That's what you want to see. So what we've stopped off to do now is trying some very, very basic rein back in the long lines. So my instructor is at his head again. I'm giving him a cue with sponging on the reins to back up, and my instructor is pointing at his legs and chest to give him a ground cue to back up, as he does there. Lots of praise. He did really, really good there. Now we try the left side. So that was his right front leg we just did. Now we're doing his left. And he did really good. Lots of praise again. And he's a very smart cookie. He has done a lot of groundwork with backing up and moving his hindquarters and forequarters on the ground, but he's never done any of it in long lines before, obviously, as it's his first time. But he picked up on it really, really quickly, and I'm so proud of him. He was licking and chewing. You can see he wasn't bothered by it at all. He didn't freak out. He was really enjoying the pats that he was getting and the attention and good boys from both of us. And you can see, you know, he just glows with this kind of work. I really enjoy seeing him learn new things because he picks up on them incredibly quickly. My instructor has said multiple times that she just adores him because he just is such a quick learner. So I'm really happy with that, considering it was the first time he'd ever tried that. And he was so soft and responsive and quick to pick up on it.
To eat the phone.
I know, he sees you so close to the game and goes, oh, human.
Same way.
So as you can see, now that we've really started to do a lot of work turning and stopping, it's suppled him up quite a bit, and he's now wanting to start and stretch consistently like he normally does on the lunge, which is really nice to see. He's become a lot more responsive, as you would have heard my instructor talk about. I used to have to pull on the long lines to get him to turn, but now he's gotten the gist of things and I'm just having to pulse on them like I would a normal pair of reins. He's still a bit antsy to halt. He wants to move off immediately. He doesn't really want to stand still properly, but that's a problem we're still working through to this day, and it'll take a while for that to not become a problem, as he is a thoroughbred, and I'm not used to having a horse that can be quite forward and sensitive and not hyper but more alert than other breeds. It's my first time also having to do any sort of proper retraining as well, so I'm glad I have my instructor here to help me and to tell me the things I need to do and sort of show me when he is thinking about things, when he is improving, things that I wouldn't be able to notice myself with my experience level, like the fact that he was quite nervous about the long lines when we first started, but now that he's gotten the gist of everything, she's telling me that, you know, him stretching is a good sign that he's now relaxed and that he gets what I'm trying to ask him. Here we're asking for a halt again, and you can see he gets a bit antsy and wants to try and move forward as soon as I stop him, but I just tell him to, no, you've got to stop for a couple seconds, then you walk. And he did, which was a nice response. Just little details that I wouldn't be able to notice with my experience level. It's good to have an instructor, especially with first time things like this, where if something was to go wrong, it could go horribly wrong. He could get tangled in those long lines if he did have a massive hissy fit, and I wouldn't have known what to do because it was my first time long lining a horse. So, you know, take home hopefully a lot of info from this video about certain things you can do with your own horse, or precautions you can take that you potentially didn't know about, because I would not have been able to get the results I got in what is this, a 25-minute video, if I hadn't have had my instructor there telling me and guiding me along the way. So in this video, as you can see, this was taken about 2 weeks after my initial lesson with my instructor. I'm with Teddy's other Lisa, who shares him with me. We are now doing some trot work on the long lines. I'm doing this without my instructor here. Teddy's other Lisa has never lunged Teddy on long lines before, so we're going in the deep end basically with no one that sort of is there that is experienced in this.
Alright.
But he's behaving
Hello,
incredibly well for me. We try a little bit of trot, either rein, and we're just testing the waters with how he's going to react. You can see I sort of slap him on the sides with the long lines to get him to go, because I don't want to have to carry a lunge whip with me or a normal whip, as he can get quite antsy, and I feel I don't need it if he goes off voice command normally on the lunge anyway.
More than he is.
You can see he behaves really, really well. He does sort of tense up and do the giraffe neck, but that's only because it's his first ever time trotting on the long lines, and he's not got any sort of security blanket in front of him to try and follow while he's trying to figure it all out. But he was such a good boy for this day, and my 64-year-old part Lisa had a go after I did this, and he was brilliant for her too. I couldn't be happier.